Happy Tuesday and welcome to September's Aging Well. I don't know about y'all, but this summer sure flew by. But I'm kind of ready. I'm kind of ready for the autumn. And I'm certainly ready to get started with tonight's program. We have got a jam-packed agenda, so we want to just jump right in. We have had so much fun reaching out to area chefs. And I think for the most part, everyone's loved them. I think most of you have tried some of these recipes, but I've also been getting emails asking for things that maybe are a little more doable, a little more realistic. And so I didn't have to look far to look for a wonderful, wonderful home chef, my husband. He is Don McLean, is a professor of internal medicine at Atrium Health, Wake Forest Baptist. So he is a medical doctor by training, but a chef by passion. And so when I was bouncing these ideas around, he said, well, I'll do that for you, because Don loves to make fancy over-the-top meals. But to be practical, he makes a lot of these really easy weekday evening dinners. So without further ado, it is a treat for me to introduce my sweet husband as he takes us through a one-pan dinner. Don?
Thanks, Deb. I'm really happy to be part of Aging Well, and I'm so proud of you for doing this and humbled to be part of it. Tonight I'm going to do something really simple. Deb and I both work, as you know, so I'm going to just do a sheet pan meal, and it's just perfect for a quick preparation. And this is the sheet pan. It's kind of heavy metal, about this big, but almost anything will work. Cookie pans and everything else. And you're going to minimize cleanup and be ecologically proper by putting in some paper. This happens to be Reynolds, believe it or not, parchment paper that we're going to line it with. And when you get to the end, you're just going to be able to lift that paper out and toss it away, and the pan will, in most cases, be clean. Now, of course, with all cooking, what you like to do is prep things ahead of time. And this, in the case of this recipe, you want the oven to be at 400 degrees. So that'll take a while to heat up. So I've got the oven preheating, and first I'm going to prep the potatoes. This is going to be potatoes, asparagus, and salmon on a pan. So depending on the size of your potatoes, you can halve them or quarter them. These are, pretty good size, small potatoes still, but, and so I'm going to quarter them. And throw them in a little bowl. And now the potatoes are cut. And I'm going to season them up a little bit, just pretty simply. I'm going to put in some, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. Actually, we like lots of pepper. And some garlic powder. And I'm going to toss that with olive oil. So I've just seasoned the potatoes with a little salt, a few grinds of pepper, and some olive oil, and tossed it around. As you'll find out when I do the recipe, there are a million variations on this. That's the nice thing. It'll never be the same dinner twice. And there are a lot of different ways to put these things together. And the cooking time really depends on the ingredients. So in this case, we're going to have asparagus and salmon and the potatoes. And the potatoes take a little bit longer to cook. So we're going to start them ahead of time while we prep the other stuff. And so I'm just going to dump them right onto the sheet pan, and I'm just going to pretty them up with a little bit of paprika, just a little color, and put them in my preheated 400 degree oven for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to add the other stuff. Okay. And actually, what I'm going to do also is you can play with this. And I've got some ideas for how to play with it. And I've just got a little red onion I happen to have left over in the fridge, and that's one of the nice things. You use whatever you got in the fridge for these kind of dishes. And you can see I've cut it through the root end so it's pretty much held together. And I'm going to toss that in that same olive oil mix, and then throw it in with the potatoes as well. So I'm going to give them 10 minutes. Always helps to have a timer. I've got my watch. I don't have a timer today, but that makes it a lot easier. Okay. Now, this is going to need some, I'm going to season the potatoes when we put in the other stuff with a little bit of rosemary. So I'm going to take that and just kind of chop it coarsely. And I'll just strew that on top of the potatoes when we add the other things. Now, the next thing is the asparagus. What you want to do is cut off the tough ends. Now, fancy chefs, and I'm not a fancy chef, but I learned this from somebody, will take it, and wherever it snaps, that means this part is tougher, and this is your nice tender part. But you don't have to do that necessarily for each stem. Once you figure out for your batch of asparagus where that tender point is, you can kind of just cut them all at that point. Now, if you've got thicker asparagus, it's going to take a little bit longer to cook. We're going to put our asparagus, these kind of little skinny guys, in for about 10 minutes. And then finally, the salmon. Now, I've got Alaskan wild fillets here, and they tend to be a little bit thinner. You see, that's just only, that's a 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch there. If you use the big fat, like farm-raised salmon, that can be 1.5 inches, again, it's going to take an extra 5 minutes to cook. So instead of putting it in after 10 minutes, you may want to put it in after 5 minutes. The bottom line is the potatoes will need to go for about 25. And now I'm seasoning the salmon. Again, this is where you just play. I've chosen tonight a honey butter Dijon mix that I'm going to put on it. This happens to be hot pepper honey. You can sprinkle jalapenos on this. You can do anything. You can jazz it up with Middle Eastern spices, a little cayenne, whatever you like. So about a couple of tablespoons of honey, a couple of tablespoons of butter, softened butter, and a teaspoon or so of Dijon mustard. And then I'm just going to mix that up. I'm going to salt and pepper the salmon. Not too much salt, of course. And then just smear on a little bit of this butter honey Dijon on top of the salmon. You can just sprinkle it with olive oil and salt and pepper if you don't want to mess with a covering for it. That works just beautifully. Or like I said, any of your favorite spices you can add. So you can see I've got the salmon, just, the reasonable amount of sauce on it. You don't need a ton. And now we're just going to wait for the 10 minutes to finish while the potatoes cook, and then we'll add our asparagus and our salmon to the pan. And while the potatoes cook, I just, like I said, I'm really happy to be on Aging Well. I've watched Deb put the series together, and it's really been amazing. I've seen most of them myself, and I really think it's a great thing for our community to get together in this kind of venue and share some of our knowledge and so on to help everybody out there live a better life. So I'm really happy to do this. Okay, it's been 10 minutes now. I'm going to take the potatoes out. And they're starting to cook really nicely. What I like to do so they brown evenly all over is maybe, if you can, just toss them around a little bit. Move them around so the different sides are exposed. Okay? And then we're just going to lay on our salmon fillets. Now, I don't oil the skin side. The reason is the skin is going to kind of stick to the paper, and I don't particularly like eating the skin, so that's going to make it easier to serve by having it stick. So I'm just going to lay the salmon fillets on there, and the asparagus. And I'm going to drizzle the asparagus with a little olive oil. And again, a touch of salt. And good old pepper. If you want to get fancy, you could tuck some lemon slices in the asparagus. And like I said, just, play with this. And there are a million ways to do it. I've given some hints in the write-up of the recipe on how long it takes for different pieces of chicken, different kinds of vegetables, etc. Okay, so we're going to put this back. And now we're going to wait 15 minutes. You can see now the asparagus are nice and roasted. They're getting a little bit of color. The potatoes have a little bit of brown on the edge, and the salmon also. So that looks good and done. So like I said, for the simple meal, this would be it. You'd be done at this point. And all you have to do is plate it and enjoy it. Now to plate it, like I said, the skin will tend to stick to the paper. And so what you can do is just take a nice flat spatula and slide it in between the skin and the meat, and the skin will generally fall right off. So we've got a beautiful piece of salmon there. Some nice asparagus. And some roasted potatoes along with that little bit of onion I just threw in for fun. If you like, you can finish the dinner with just a little bit of lemon, maybe on the salmon and the asparagus. So Deb, you ready to eat? Okay, so I've plated out the dinner, and I just wanted to show you one of the nicest things about sheet pan cooking when you use the parchment paper, which is, now we've got our piece of paper. There's some of the olive oil on there. The skins, salmon skins are left. And that's cleanup.
And I can attest, dinner was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I will tell you this for y'all that got the recipes and paid a lot of attention to it. There was also a second recipe on there for an amazing pasta. And there was just no way, we shot both videos, but there was no way both could be in there. So everyone who's on tonight is going to get a second video with Dawn showing this other amazing pasta dish. So you will get that demonstration video. And now I want to move on to our lifestyle segment. And I know many of you are probably like me. The only way that I can tell what the weather's doing is look outside or hold my hand out and find out if it's going to get wet or not or hot. And but thank goodness I'm not in charge of delivering the weather to everyone, but a friend of ours is. And when I met her, shortly after we moved to Winston, I said, I feel like I know you so well because I spend my evenings with you. Of course, she didn't know me, but we have become friends through the years. And so this was a real treat for me that when I threw out the idea of Lainey going through what it takes to produce our weather, she was all in, couldn't wait. Anything she said for the Stick Center, she's in for. So I think you're going to enjoy seeing this kind of VIP behind the scenes tour. And Lainey Pope is our chief meteorologist at WXII. So Lainey, show us how it's done.
Hello, Deb. I'm so excited to be a part of Aging Well. You are here at WXII 12. We're in the Weather Center, so come on in. I'm going to show you, this is actually my desk where I work, and of course we have a lot of other desks in here for Michelle, Brian, Jacqueline, our entire weather team. Well, every day when I sit down to do the forecast, I usually use computers like this, and you hear us talk about computer models. Well, I'll show you a couple of those because we do like to look at that kind of information, because what it does is it helps us to see the atmosphere. The atmosphere is kind of layered like lasagna, so we want to see what's happening at each and every layer because that has an impact on what happens on the ground. So you can see there's a lot of different models here to choose from. So in a daily, I'll kind of go through and look at all of them. I'm just going to show you one right now. So we'll pick one of those. We'll jump in here, and then it also, because these are run about every 12 hours or so, you're going to get different versions of it. So I always want the latest version, and then I'm going to look at some different layers, but I'm just going to show you one of those layers that gives me a good idea. And then of course these are the forecast hours, so this one goes out a long ways, right? A good 7 days or more. Now we know as we go out in time, things usually don't always pan out the way we think they're going to, because the earth and the air that's moving around it is constantly changing. That's why the models keep being run. But this gives you an idea. In fact, you see area of low pressure right here, and you see the L. You also see the rain associated with that. So as I punch through that, you're going to watch that kind of move in time. So we'll go through time and we'll show you the movement of that low and that rain moving away. And then we're looking at the red lines too, because those actually help us determine what the temperature is going to be in that particular layer. So that's just kind of a general gist of how we put together the forecast. So I'll sit down and I'll look at the computer models. I'll look at what they're saying is going to happen over time, over the next day, over the next few hours, maybe even over the next several days. And then I'll kind of decide whether or not I think they're right or where I think things are headed. And I also use my experience, because that's really important too, because the computers don't always know what's happening outside. And so we have to look outside. We also have to think about when the last time a storm like this moved through, what happened? And were the models correct? Were they not? So we learn from our experience too. Once we do that, well, it is time for us to get to our forecast sheet. So we will put our days of the week up here, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, if that's the forecast period. We divide it into triad, foothills, and mountains, because we have 3 different climate zones here. The triad, of course, is where Winston-Salem is. Foothills would be like Mount Airy, and the mountains would be Sparta. So we'll go through different time periods. We'll put a temperature down. We'll put the wind. Pop is the amount of precipitation we think. So maybe it's 20%, 40%. The icon is whether it's sunny, whether it's partly cloudy, whether it's stormy. And then we leave room here if we want to add words like fog or maybe something like windy. So we put all of this together, and then it's time for us to actually make the graphics. So once I've got all of my numbers written out, my percentages of precipitation, the winds, all the information that I need, it's time to actually make the graphics and the maps that you see on television. So yeah, we're graphic artists as well as a forecaster. So one of the ways we do that is we come into our weather computer here. We have Piedmont Triad, we have foothills, we have mountains, we have the beaches. We're gonna go into the Piedmont Triad. We've got a 10-day forecast, and we've also got a 48-hour forecast. So while we're doing this is also going to populate to our web page. So that's really helpful because we're kind of doing two things at once. So we're going to do the 7-day forecast. We'll do the morning temperature, the next day's high temperature, and then we'll go to the next day, Thursday, and then we move on to Friday, and then we keep going down to Saturday. So we'll fill in temperature, we'll type in information, and we'll choose the right picture, so to speak, whether it's a mostly sunny or whether it's a stormy one. Once we get all of that information in there and we think we like it, we're gonna hit over here, publish. And when we hit publish, that means it's gonna go where it needs to go. Then we also come into the 48-hour forecast, and you see this real 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., all of that. You see the temperatures, you also see the winds, and then there's some writing as to like what we expect, isolated severe storms. We'll type in information like that. Once we get all that the way we like it, we'll also hit publish. So again, that's gonna go to the web page, and it's also going to populate to our graphics. So you can see all of these different graphics here on the screen. I'm gonna scroll down, and we are going to choose a forecast map so I can show you what I have just done. So over here, once we get all those numbers in there, they are going to magically appear right here. So all of the numbers that I typed in correspond to the time of day, and then the precipitation chances are there. The weather icon that I choose, I put in the winds. So you're gonna get that for the Piedmont, you're gonna get that for the foothills. You'll see the numbers are a little bit different, and then you're going to get that for the mountains. So we have a lot of different ways of presenting the forecast. So you might see it shown that way on television, but you might also see it shown this way. So that information is just presented a little bit differently, 7 a.m., noon, 4. So just depending on which newscast you watch or weathercast you get, you may get some different information or maps. We also have, it populates into a holiday weekend forecast, or like an extended weekend, like Labor Day, you wanted to add Monday, we can show that for different zones. And of course, our familiar 7-day forecast, right? So that's all the information that I put in there. And then the other things that we have in here, of course, are our radar. So I'm going to show you the radar here, and we can look at it. And then we have the ability to go into that radar when we have storms. You've seen me before, I'll zoom in to an area and I can show you all the towns. I can also go in when we have tornado warnings and things like that, and I can look at what is the wind doing in this storm. So there's a lot of different things that we can look at when we're doing the radar. And you can see there's a lot of choices there on the side. So once we decide that we have our maps ready, it's time to put our maps in order. Let's say we're going to do this first weather segment here. Anything that you see that's showing up and is not grayed out, that is going to be seen when we go through our show. So I've decided which way I want. Let's say I want this one to go before the other one. Well, all I do is just kind of drag it and move it. Oh no, I changed my mind. I think I'm going to put this one in front of that one. Once I get that set and I'm ready to go, I'm going to hit play, and then I'm ready to go on TV. Okay, so once I hit play on my weather computer, it's time for us to go on TV. So I'll be in the weather studio, come out of the weather center into the studio here. This is where I usually stand. And across from me would be anchors like Kenny and Talitha who would talk to me. And so they would talk to me, and I'm gonna talk to them across that shot. And then right over there, that's the camera that I usually start off on. And so I will then walk from where I am over to the weather wall. You don't usually see that on television, but then I walk in and notice that I'm here in front of the weather maps, right? So I'm able to see myself there. I'm also able to see myself on the other side over here, right? So I know when I'm pointing at Asheville, I can see that. And I'm also able to see myself in the actual camera where I am looking at you, because right in there, that is where the lens is. So I can say, hi. So kind of sometimes actually I can go, hey, right here and right here and right here, and that looks kind of funny. But here's how we would do a forecast. So then I would start off the forecast and I would say, all right, folks, we've got some rain heading our way. Take a look. You can see the wet weather from Greenville to Asheville to up toward Bristol, and it's going to be moving in. There's been quite a bit of active severe weather tonight, as we've had a lot of wind damage out to the west, and there's still a chance that we're going to have some severe weather tonight as we are in that marginal risk area. Right now, the radar looks pretty dry across the region, but that could change. As you can see, that rain moving our way. So we do have wet weather in the forecast. In fact, maybe too much wet weather in the forecast, as we do have a flash flood watch out for our area as we are dealing with the remnants of Ida. Now, as we look at our forecast, you're going to see tomorrow the temperatures start off close to 70, high temperature of 83, breezy conditions, scattered showers and thunderstorms. In the foothills, we also have that chance for wet weather and thunderstorms, as well as temperatures that are in the 70s. And in the mountains, our temperatures are in the low 70s tomorrow afternoon. We also have wind gusts to 25, 30 miles an hour. Here's a look at our 7-day forecast. You're going to see a big cool down. We've got temps that'll be in the 50s in the morning, heading into the Labor Day weekend. So that's just an example of a little bit of how I do my weather forecasting. If we are meteorologists, which means we're forecasting the weather, we're actually graphic artists, so to speak, because we're making those graphics and putting those fronts and things on the weather maps. And then we're a communicator. So we have to take that knowledge and all of that science and put it down into some pretty short sentences in a real short amount of time, usually about 2 minutes and 30 seconds to maybe 3 minutes and 30 seconds. That's about as long as a weather forecast is in an average day. Thanks for joining me here in the WXII 12 Weather Center. I'm going to send it back to you, Deb.
That was so fun to get a behind the scenes visit with Lainey. So I'm always so grateful when she adds her spark to everything. And, you know, we talk about aging and memory, and so many of us are worried about our memory, and it could be something that's just perfectly normal for our age, or maybe there's reason to be concerned. But I tapped another wonderful, wonderful friend and trusted colleague, Dr. Tim Hughes. He is an associate professor of internal medicine at Atrium Health, Wake Forest Baptist, and he is just the best there is. When we want to know aging and memory, what's normal. So Dr. Hughes.
Wonderful, Deb. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here tonight, everyone. And I'm really looking forward to talking with you about this. So have you ever wondered what it means for your brain to age normally, and what is normal about forgetting your keys or forgetting names? Well, we're going to talk about that tonight, when we're going to talk about what's normal and what's not in memory and aging. Okay, so we're going to do this in 3 parts. What we're going to do first is talk about what's normal aging for the brain. How do we get memory loss? And most importantly, how can we prevent memory loss and forms of dementia? So let's jump right in. Do we have anyone here in the audience tonight who's an expert on what it means for your body to age? We all can see how aging happens. We all can feel how aging happens: aches, pains, slowing down, wrinkles, some forgetfulness. So what I'd like you to do is at the bottom of your screen in the chat section, if you'd like, put your favorite or least favorite sign of your body aging, and we can share those amongst each other. But talking about how does the brain age is a little more difficult because we often can't see it, and we often see signs of this in others as they age. But we really want to know, when is it a problem and when do we need to do something about it? This concern about memory and our brain aging is one of the most common reasons why people have concerns about aging. In this silly infographic here that was aggregating data from 22,000 people, ages 15 and older from 17 countries, put memory loss as one of the top concerns people have about aging. Okay, now this was 15 years and older. All right, when we get into the realm of asking people who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, we're talking about 70% or more of people have mild, moderate, or serious concerns about their memory loss that they're observing. Cognitive function just means how your brain processes information. Right now, you're hearing me. You're having some attention. You're processing the words that I'm saying, and hopefully you're going to make a few memories out of this. All of this is a beautifully orchestrated symphony that your brain does every moment. And all of that allows you to do the amazing things that you do every day, from walking the dog to spending time, having a great conversation with a friend, and attending something as wonderful as this Aging Well series. You require your brain to function at its peak for all of these aspects. Well, sometimes the brain starts to fail with age, and one of those conditions is dementia. In 2015, there were 46 million people in the world who had dementia, and that number is going to triple in the next 30 years. And one of the most common forms of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. Here we're looking at across the various ages shown in different colors, across the years of 2010 to 2050. Again, the numbers are almost going to triple for Alzheimer's disease, and most importantly, in the oldest old. But here's a secret that most people don't realize, is that while the total numbers are increasing for Alzheimer's disease because we have the biggest population of older adults we've ever had, your individual risk is actually declining. These noodles over on the right are the risk of developing, the incidence of developing dementia for people who were born in the 1900s and later. And what you're seeing is that every age group, the risk of getting dementia is actually going down for the individual. And why is that? Well, let's talk about what dementia looks like in the brain of an older adult. There are multiple types of dementia. You've probably heard of Alzheimer's disease because it is one of the most common. There's also vascular forms, Lewy body dementia and frontal temporal dementia. And here are the percentages of what they contribute overall. But in reality, when we look at the brains of older adults who develop dementia, 70% of them don't have a pure form of Alzheimer's disease. And they actually have an overlap of vascular disorders that are very common. That's important because vascular disorders we know how to treat, we know how to prevent, and we know how to cure. So how do we get memory loss and dementia? This interesting line of a life course here is really small, but we're going to focus in. This talks about the life course of how individual things that we all are familiar with contribute to our risk of getting dementia. We have genes that can make some part of our risk, and those are predetermined before we ever get here. But interestingly, things like getting a good education, staying engaged, being a lifetime learner contributes a lot to reduce our risk. In middle age, things like hearing loss, hypertension, and obesity can increase our risk. And later in life, things like smoking, depression, physical inactivity, social isolation, and diabetes all contribute to our risk of getting dementia. You'll see these circles over here in the corner, and 35% of our risk of getting dementia appears to be modifiable. And that's important because we can do something about those. So we could summarize it this way. How do we get Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia? You can summarize them in 4 points. Aging. Age is the #1 risk factor. If you don't make it to late life, you're not going to get a form of dementia. Genetic risks. The buildup of proteins like plaques in the brain and the tangles that you may have heard about. And then also lifestyle. Well, how do we stop Alzheimer's disease? Well, maybe we can stop aging. I doubt that that is going to be a way that any of us want to move forward with this. Another is we could maybe change our genes. Given that genetic risk means so little for late life dementias, that's probably not going to help very much. Another approach has been the removal of proteins, and there are drugs being developed now that are testing whether that will actually help prevent people from getting dementia. And the last, lifestyle. We can modify our lifestyle in certain ways to help us reduce the risk of getting dementia. Let's talk about those. How do we prevent memory loss and dementia? Well, first, let's go to the individual pieces. What's normal and what's not with aging memory? And is there a gray zone here that may be an important area for us to intervene on? So what's normal? We all forget names as we get older, some more than others. We may get a little confused when we're doing too many things at once. Is anyone really great at being a multitasker? You probably think you are, but others may say different. It takes more time and more energy to learn something, okay? And that may make it feel more difficult, and it may make you anxious about it being more difficult, but you can still do it. Being unable to remember why you entered a room, who hasn't done that? You walk into a room and what do? And come in and see if it comes back to you, and it often does. And one of the most common phrases in aging is, "Oh, what is that? It's on the tip of my tongue. I just can't remember." These are all normal signs of brain aging. And those are things we can expect. Now, things that are not normal, when we really start to look and pay attention to whether or not we need to intervene, is when individuals start to feel confused more often than usual. They get lost and turned around in familiar places, and this may inhibit their ability to drive or to travel on their own. Have you known anyone who's started to repeat themselves in conversations over important details that they may have just discussed? Family and friends start to notice a difference in these, and that's actually a really important thing for us when we're looking to help diagnose someone. And an interesting one is if someone has always loved to do a hobby or an activity and they just can no longer do it, that's the point at which we know things are not normal and that there may be something serious going on that we need to address. But I'm here today to tell you that we don't have to wait to see these signs. There's a gray zone that means a lot for us when we talk about changing someone's risk. And that gray zone is called mild cognitive impairment. Here are some of the things that characterize that. Having a little bit more trouble remembering appointments, dates, etc. Forgetting the occasional meeting, forgetting a birthday, but it's not like forgetting the name of someone you know. Feeling overwhelmed more often. I'm glad that this one isn't a serious one because I think in this COVID area, we all feel a little bit more overwhelmed more often, and hopefully that will change. Feel that something is just not right, even though others fail to notice a change. That is a subjective concern. I just don't feel like my memory is as good. And we talked about that. That is a very common thing for older adults, but it can also be a sign that maybe we need to look deeper. feeling a little bit more irritable or short-fused, and feeling stressed more often than usual. As I said, this is the best time to intervene, because when we can consider someone's complaints about their memory, and we can identify when people are in this area, this gray zone of mild cognitive impairment, we can help to change the trajectory that someone is on and hopefully prevent them from getting dementia. Now, when experts have looked across all of the data available on how to prevent dementia, we're talking about lifestyle changes, eating differently, controlling blood pressure, diabetes, taking new drugs that are available on the market. The best evidence comes down to this: controlling blood pressure, staying cognitively engaged, learning new things, and increasing physical activity. And another key part is knowing that you have medical conditions that can increase your risk of developing dementia and controlling them. This list here are very common conditions that all increase the risk a little bit for moving towards dementia, and they're all treatable. So controlling these risk factors helps us reduce our risk. Finally, prevention is key. What we want to do is we want to remember these things for prevention, these three keys: move more, think more, help more. Because when we increase our physical activity, it is not only good for our body, but it supplies so much important blood, nutrients, and oxygen to our brain that our brain benefits as well. Try new activities that require you to think, a new skill, doing puzzles, learning a foreign language, learning a new musical instrument. These things cause your brain to work out like we try to work out our bodies to keep them healthy. And so important, staying connected to family and friends allows us to feel the amazing parts of life, to know that we are connected, and to stay our way from being depressed and isolated, because those things can actually accelerate our path towards cognitive problems. Another interesting one is to volunteer more and do social outings and community events. The altruism of doing something for others can help reduce our anxiety and actually helps us perform better. If anyone remembers having test anxiety in school, you know that your brain doesn't function well when you are anxious. Doing these things for others reduces our anxiety and actually helps our brains function at their best. And as I said, know and control what risk factors you have. Today, you've learned about several of them, including medical conditions and lifestyle factors that are important. And you're going to get a handout that tells you some of these. And remember that it's important to move more, not just for your body, but also for your brain. There are plenty of ways to learn more about risk for dementia and even ways to get involved to help us find not only cures for Alzheimer's and related dementias, but what we care the most about is actually keeping people from ever getting Alzheimer's and related dementias. That's possible, and we're finding new ways every day. So the work of myself and my colleagues, we look for new ways to prevent getting dementia, and we test them out in clinical trials, and we hope to get them into clinics as quickly as possible. None of this is possible without volunteers and without the support of the community. We need the whole community involved if we're going to find something that works for everyone. So with that, I'd love to say thank you for the invitation today. It's a pleasure to be with you virtually. I love seeing so many people on the Aging Well series, and I have to thank you, Deb, for what you've done for putting this together. And I'll pause there and take questions.
Well, as you might imagine, we have been getting some great questions. And the first one has been, are y'all hearing an echo or is it just me? I'm not going to worry
I think
about
it's
it.
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
What is the difference between Alzheimer's that affects an older person and early onset Alzheimer's?
Great question. What's the difference between early onset Alzheimer's and late age Alzheimer's? Well, there's a lot that's different. The early forms of the disease happen usually before the age of 65. They run in families and they're really influenced by our genes. We actually know about 3 different genes that increase our risk for early onset. So what we do is we look for families where there are more than one person who has developed an early form of dementia in their 40s, 50s, or 60s. And we look to see if they have genes that increase the risk for that. Late onset Alzheimer's disease is what I've been talking about today. That is far more common. That accounts for 95% of the cases of dementia, whereas early onset is just 5%. So when we take this view of going after late onset, it's less about genes and more about what we can do to reduce our risk for developing the disorder.
So what about dementia as a result of a stroke? How is that different from Alzheimer's?
Great question. That is that category of vascular dementia that we talked about. Vascular dementia looks very different. Alzheimer's is a very slow progression, often looks like memory problems. Stroke and vascular dementia is a very rapid onset. Usually there's signs of a stroke, either visually or on brain imaging, that allow us to see what has affected cognitive performance. And that often is a bit slowing of cognition and less memory.
So one person has asked about hormone replacement.
Okay, and that is whether or not it prevents or contributes.
Contributes to.
Okay. That's an interesting question. I think that there's a lot of research in that area. We don't have a good answer right now. We do think that there are some studies looking at estrogen replacement as a way to treat cognitive problems later in life. Those clinical trials are ongoing, so I'm not going to come out with a verdict yet on that, but stay tuned. We'll have more on that later.
So how can I get involved in research at Wake Forest?
Well, that's great. So you can just look up Wake Forest Alzheimer's, and that will take you to that page that I displayed at the last slide. And there are ways to get involved. That will get you in contact with somebody. The other thing you can do is dial 716-MIND, and that will get you in touch with someone who can help you find the study that's right for you. We do various things. If you are interested in a drug study, the latest, greatest drugs that are being developed for Alzheimer's disease, we have plenty of studies like that. We also have studies that are about lifestyle, about exercise, about eating differently, that may be able to give our brain different fuels to help slow and prevent Alzheimer's disease.
So my father was diagnosed and passed with Alzheimer's. What is my chance of me or my children developing it?
Great question. Your chance is driven most by your current age. The next part for family history, there are some studies that suggest that having a father with Alzheimer's disease increases your risk about 2-fold. And having a mother with Alzheimer's disease may increase your risk about 3-fold. That said, that's just your risk at your age. That doesn't mean that you have a 70% chance of developing it. These were all actually really small. And when you looked at the modifiable aspects of the disease, that accounted for 35% of our risk for developing the disease. So it's really great to focus on what we can do to make our bodies and minds healthy.
What does it mean when you can't remember words?
Oh, great. So there are different medical terms for that. Aphasia is one of them, and that is common when you think of it like that example. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember the word for that. That happens commonly. When we see people who have dementia, and it differs by the type of dementia, but sometimes the words that come out don't make sense. They don't fit together. They may be, in the case of some certain strokes, they may be saying a word that is nonsensical over and over again, and that's the only thing that they can say. Okay, so these are different than just our normal age-related, I can't remember that word right now. It often comes back to us.
Is hoarding for an 86-year-old a sign of dementia, even though everything else seems normal?
Great question. I have not seen any research showing that hoarding increases your risk. Often there are behavioral aspects of hoarding that can increase someone's risk, like social isolation and being withdrawn. And those things, as we learned today, actually increase our risk. So I wouldn't say that having too many things in your house, don't worry if you have a messy house, that doesn't increase your risk of getting dementia.
Okay. So if a parent has dementia, how important is it to distinguish the type, vascular versus Alzheimer's?
That's a great question. It is important to know, especially if you have, let's say you had a parent with vascular dementia and you have vascular disease. That means that you may be on your way towards developing vascular dementia in the future. The same can be said for Alzheimer's. We know that with late onset Alzheimer's disease, the proteins that build up, it isn't often because our bodies make too much of them. It's because our body loses its ability to clear them. And so for early onset Alzheimer's disease, that's really important because that's an overproduction. For late onset Alzheimer's disease, it can help to know if you had a relative who had that, especially a mother or a father, as I mentioned.
You know, we talk a lot about sleep apnea being a contributing factor to developing Alzheimer's or other dementias. And one person's asking, I've been using a CPAP machine since 2003. I use it consistently. Is my risk for dementia still high?
Great question. CPAP is one of those things that is incredibly effective at reducing vascular disease in the brain. When we see someone with sleep apnea, what we tend to see are these things called white matter hyperintensities that are really easily seen on MRIs. And when people use the CPAP, what they do is they actually reduce the inflammation in their brain from sleep apnea. They give it proper oxygen, and we'll actually see those white matter hyperintensities disappear. Those hyperintensities are often seen in people who get dementia. They don't cause dementia often, but they make things worse. So using your CPAP, if you have sleep apnea, is one way to reduce your risk of moving towards dementia.
So I would say using it since 2003, you're doing exactly what you should be doing.
Absolutely. Keep it up.
All right. So now let's talk about brain boosting foods.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Any specific that we're throwing out, or should I just jump in? Okay.
Just jump in.
So you'll be happy to know that your body, your brain is fed in two ways. One is oxygen. So we've got to keep oxygen flowing to the brain. And the other is by glucose. And those glucose come from all sorts of different foods. It's like our blood sugar. One of the problems is when people have high blood sugar, they can move towards developing diabetes, and that is bad for the brain. It increases our risk. So foods that help our blood sugar stay at a normal level are good. Other foods that may be very helpful are eating diets that reduce inflammation and give us good fats in our diets. So there's actually a MIND diet that was developed specifically for Alzheimer's disease that has been tested in clinical trials and continues to be tested to see if it will prevent dementia. It looks very similar to a Mediterranean style diet, if you're familiar with that. Other diets being tested are direct Mediterranean diets and those that actually help reduce the amount of carbohydrates we're taking in to provide other fuels for our brain to use. And we test out several of those here at Wake Forest.
I know that's the Beat AD study that's currently
That's
going on
right.
too.
That's
So
right.
along
Go
that
ahead.
same line, how much exercise per week should we be getting to help reduce our risk?
That is a controversial topic, but I'll tell you my impression, and I'll tell you what I've seen in the literature. It's an active area of study. What we hope is that there will be a prescription one day for, if you have cognitive problems, exercise this number of weeks. I would say from what I have seen doing research over the past several years is that any exercise you do today will benefit your body and your brain. The more exercise you do, probably the better for your body and your brain. As long as it's good for your body, it's going to be good for your brain. Okay. And sweating a bit is excellent for both your body and your brain. I'm not saying you have to sweat for 30 minutes 3 times a week. We're not there to make that suggestion yet, but seriously, any movement you can do more during the day, like walking, is incredibly beneficial for maintaining our brain health.
And, you know, even parking further away from the grocery store or from church, any little thing helps. I know that. I've listened to your talk long enough to know that. So
That's right.
how does alcohol affect dementia?
Great question. It depends on the amount of alcohol. Mild to moderate alcohol is believed to reduce our risk of getting dementia. However, that has never been studied in a randomized clinical trial. So we don't have the most definitive amount of evidence. We know that drinking too much to the point of alcoholism actually increases our risk for developing dementia. And that is one way to develop dementia earlier in life is through alcoholism. So we have to be careful, but it's okay to have a little bit of alcohol to reduce your risks.
So how much research has been used with hearing impaired individuals relative to dementia?
Great question. There is a wonderful clinical trial that's ongoing right now that Wake Forest participates in called Achieve. That clinical trial is randomizing people to getting, everyone in the study has some level of hearing impairment. And they randomize people to getting hearing aids, free hearing aids, and to be encouraged to use them throughout the course of the study. It is getting ready to finish. They're in their follow-up visit now, I believe at 24 months. And this will be a definitive randomized clinical trial to see if treating hearing impairment just simply with encouraging the use of hearing aids helps people stay engaged and helps them stay more cognitively alert and maybe even prevents dementia.
Well, Dr. Hughes, I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight. We have had huge turnout. We've had great questions. And just to let everyone know, you will be getting a copy of Dr. Hughes's handout. So it's got that information on there, how you can get in touch with the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. I love to brag on that center because we're one of only 33 in the country. And we're so lucky to have a center of that caliber right here in Winston-Salem. So it's kind of exciting for me to get to work around smart people like Dr. Hughes. I just get to share the message of all their good work. So we just want to thank y'all for being here. October 12th is our next date. So please put that on your calendar. You'll be getting a follow-up video, a copy of this. And the notes, you will be getting Dr. Hughes's slides from tonight. So all the contact information you need will be on there. And we hope to see you. Have a wonderful, wonderful first part of fall. And we'll see you in October.